Few months ago, I found out exactly what my little sister thought I was worth. It started with a text that lit up my screen in the middle of a normal workday. No hey, no heart emoji, no sisterly warmth. Just a wall of cold words that sliced straight through me. My fiancé doesn't want you at the wedding. You don't fit the vibe. He says you make everything about you. And honestly, you dress kind of cheap. I stared at the message, feeling that familiar mix of anger and nausea twist in my gut. I had paid off debts she never even knew how to calculate, slipped rent money into her account when she pretended the landlord was just being mean, and sat awake at 3 in the morning talking her down from panic attacks. Now I was bad for the vibe. I typed, erased, retyped. Then, instead of begging, I let something colder settle in my chest. It's a shame I spent years investing in your life just to be told I don't belong in it, I finally wrote. I watched the three dots blink, disappear, blink again, then stop. No apology, no backtrack, just silence. So I did something she never expected. I opened my laptop, pulled up every transfer, every booking, every surprise gift I had lined up for her dream wedding, and one by one, I shut them down. The catering upgrade? Cancelled. The honeymoon contribution? Recalled. The secret custom gift I'd been designing for months? Deleted with a single click. Before I tell you what her fiancé said to my face, and how my revenge turned their perfect wedding into a slow-motion disaster, tell me, what time is it where you are? And where are you watching from? I want to see just how far this family secret will travel. By the time I finished canceling everything, my hands were steady, but my heart was burning. For years, I'd told myself I was just being a good sister, that all the late payments I covered and the tears I wiped away were what family does. That text ripped the pretty label off what we really were: a provider and a taker. Still, old habits don't die quietly. A part of me needed to hear her voice, to know whether those words were truly hers or just parroting whatever her fiancé had decided about me. I hit call before I could overthink it. As the phone rang, memories flashed in split screen in my mind. On one side, a teenage Hannah curled into me on a worn-out couch, mascara streaked, sobbing that no one would ever love her. On the other, the same girl in a white dress I'd never see in person, laughing with the man who called me pathetic. The line clicked. "Why are you calling?" She snapped, no hello. Her voice was tight, impatient, like I was a spam number interrupting her day. "Because I just got your text," I said, forcing my tone to stay level. "Your fiancé doesn't want me there? I don't fit the vibe? Is that really how you see me?" There was a pause, then a sigh I knew too well. "Sophie, this is exactly what I meant. Drama. You always turn everything into a crisis. This is my wedding. My life. I don't want it overshadowed." For a second, the illusion almost snapped back into place. I wanted to remind her who signed the first lease she lived under, who co-signed her car, who kept food in her fridge for a year after graduation. Instead, I bit down on my tongue so hard I could taste metal. "Overshadowed?" I repeated. "I've spent years keeping the lights on for you in the background. That's not overshadowing. That's support." She laughed, a short, cruel sound I'd never heard from her before. "You think paying a few bills gives you the right to control my life? You act like a parent, not a sister." He's right. You make everything about you. I want a stress-free wedding. That means no guilt trips, no passive-aggressive comments, no you. The words landed one by one, like doors slamming shut down a hallway. For a moment, I couldn't speak. In my mind, the split screen flickered again. Hannah, at 16, begging me not to leave her alone in a hospital waiting room. Hannah now, pushing me out of her entire life because her fiancé didn't like my vibe. What kind of sister rewrites history so cleanly? I swallowed. Is that really how you feel? I asked quietly. Or is that what he decided and you're just repeating it? It doesn't matter who said it first, she snapped. We're a team now. If he's not comfortable with you there, I'm not comfortable with you there. Maybe you should focus on your own life instead of micromanaging mine. There it was. The promotion from savior to burden, stamped and sealed. The part of me that still wanted to beg started to rise, but something darker got there first. A cold thought slid into place like a puzzle piece. If she truly believes I'm the problem, what happens when the problem walks away and takes every invisible safety net with it? You're right, I said, surprising even myself with how calm I sounded. You two are a team now, and every team should play with the consequences of their own choices. What's that supposed to mean? She demanded. I almost told her, almost warned her about the things I'd noticed about him, the lies that didn't add up, the late-night calls he took on the balcony when he thought no one was listening. But she'd just told me I was a distraction, a liability. It means, I said, that from now on you won't have to worry about me being involved in your life at all. Before she could answer, I hung up. I stared at my reflection in the black screen of my phone. This was the exact moment something inside me shifted. I wasn't just hurt anymore. I was done. And when someone like me is finally done, tell me, is it still revenge if all you do is stop saving the person who keeps pushing you away? I didn't cry after that call. Not immediately. Instead, I walked into my living room, grabbed a pen and notebook, and started writing. Not feelings, facts. Line by line, I turned years of unspoken generosity into a list. It was almost clinical. 1. First-year college tuition when she forgot her financial aid deadline. 2. 3 months' rent when her roommate bailed and she called me sobbing. 3. The car down payment she swore she'd totally pay back once she got a steady job. 4. The credit card balance I quietly covered when collectors started calling. 5. The wedding dress deposit when the boutique accidentally double-charged her and she couldn't ask him. It would be embarrassing. The list kept growing. Birthdays, emergencies, small loans that never found their way back. On the page, my love didn't look like love. It looked like a ledger, a map of dependence. And for the first time, it made me angry instead of proud. Later that evening, my best friend Lydia came over with takeout, and that look on her face, the one she uses when she knows I'm about to pretend I'm fine. You look like you just lost a lawsuit, she said, kicking off her shoes. What happened? I handed her my phone so she could read the text, then summarized the call in as few words as possible. No spin, no sugar, just the raw outline. She read in silence, her jaw tightening. Wow, she said finally. She really said you don't fit the vibe? And that I dress cheap, I added dryly. Apparently the money is acceptable, the outfits are not. Lydia set the phone down and leaned back, studying me. You know I love her because she's your sister, she said slowly. But this? This is entitlement with a spray tan. You've been funding her life for years. She doesn't get to erase that just because some guy with a fragile ego decided you threaten his aesthetic. I almost laughed. He thinks I'm controlling, I said. Is it controlling to make sure she doesn't get evicted? To pay hospital bills? To keep her afloat every time she sinks? It's enabling if you never let her feel what sinking really means, Lydia replied gently. Look at this list, Soph. She picked up my notebook. This isn't normal sister stuff. This is full-time crisis management with no salary. I stared at the ink on the page. Each line was a memory, a late-night drive, a wire transfer, a lie I told my own landlord so I could cover hers. So what? I just... Stop? I asked. Cold turkey? You stop being her invisible safety net, Lydia said. You let her live the life she thinks she wants. With him. On his terms. without your money, your credit score, or your emotional labor. And if that feels like revenge, maybe that says more about what she's been taking than what you're doing. That sentence lodged in my chest. If simply stepping back looked like punishment, what did that make the life I'd been living? That night, I opened my banking app and began dismantling the quiet empire I'd built under her feet. The shared account where I slipped emergency money? Closed. Automatic payments I'd set up for her utilities, just until she got on her feet? Cancelled. The planned lump sum I'd saved for her honeymoon as a surprise? Transferred back to my own savings with a note, future emergencies, mine. But I didn't stop there, because there was something else that had been gnawing at me for months, something I'd brushed aside for peace. Her fiancé, Peter, worked at a startup that never seemed to have a clear product, just buzzwords and rounds of funding. The numbers he bragged about didn't line up with what I knew from working in media and watching corporate scandals unfold. I'd seen his LinkedIn, his flimsy job description, the weird way he dodged questions about taxes and payroll. I'd also seen the fear flash across Hannah's face once when his name lit up her phone after midnight. Back then, I'd filed it away under "not my business." Now, without the fog of guilt clouding everything, it felt very much like my business. And not as a sister. As someone who hates liars with a public platform. I started digging. Public records, old press releases, news mentions about his company. It didn't take long to find red flags, lawsuits from former employees, whispers of misused investor funds, a quiet settlement that had never made it to mainstream headlines. I opened a new document and began collecting everything. Links, names, dates, screenshots. My list of sacrifices morphed into something new, a dossier, a file that, in the right hands, could burn through his carefully curated image faster than any rumor. If you knew your sister was marrying a man built on lies, I thought as I saved the file, would you drag her away from the altar, or let the truth catch up to him in its own time? In that moment, I realized my revenge wasn't going to be screaming at a rehearsal dinner or making a scene at the ceremony. It was going to be much quieter, and much, much louder. I told myself I wasn't going to go near the wedding venue, that I'd spend the day at a spa or buried in work, or doing literally anything other than orbiting the event I'd been cut out of. But when the morning came, my body betrayed me. My hands got dressed. My feet walked out the door. My mind drove to the edge of the property like it was following muscle memory instead of logic. I parked on a side street just out of sight, where the venue's fairy lights spilled soft gold over expensive cars and curated happiness. From my vantage point, framed by a cluster of trees, I could see everything without being seen. It was like watching a movie where someone had edited me out of every scene. Guests drifted in, laughing, adjusting ties, and smoothing dresses. Photographers shouted cheerful directions. Somewhere inside, music floated out like perfume, syrupy and romantic. For a second, I saw a ghost version of the day, the one we'd once planned together when we were teenagers. Me helping her into a dress, pinning her veil, hiding in a bathroom stall with her when nerves hit. That future had been deleted with a text message. Now I was just the audience. Then she stepped outside, and the air left my lungs. Hannah looked beautiful. Of course she did. Her dress hugged her in all the right places, the kind of gown people repost on Pinterest for years. Her hair was swept back, her makeup natural enough to pretend she didn't try. She laughed at something someone said, and for a moment she looked like the kid who used to dance in our parents' kitchen in mismatched socks. My chest ached. But even from a distance, I saw things I knew the other guests missed. The way her shoulders tensed when Peter wasn't within arm's reach. How her eyes flickered toward the parking lot like she was expecting something, someone, to show up and save her from herself. Maybe me. But I stayed in the shadows. Let her feel what it's like when the person you're used to leaning on isn't there. Peter emerged a few minutes later, shaking hands, clapping backs, wearing a smile he probably practiced in the mirror. He looked polished, charming, the perfect groom. If I didn't know better, I might have believed it. But now that I'd dug through his professional life, I couldn't unsee the cracks. The lawsuits, the investor complaints, the clerical errors that magically ended with his accounts just fine and everyone else scrambling. Their photographer posed them near the archway for couple shots before the ceremony. As they stood together, his phone buzzed. I watched him glance at the screen, his jaw tightening. He slipped the phone back into his pocket, but not before I caught a glimpse of the name on the screen in the reflection of a glass door. Someone from his company. Someone I'd seen in a lawsuit headline. Interesting timing. When the photographer walked away to adjust a lens, Peter stepped aside, pulled the phone halfway out again, and spoke under his breath. I zoomed my phone camera in, pretending to take a casual video of the grounds. The audio would be distant, but sometimes tone says more than words. "I told you not to call me today," he hissed. "No, they can't prove anything. Just sit tight and don't move any money until I say so." My stomach tightened. There it was. The arrogance. The assumption that consequences always belong to other people. As he turned back to Hannah, his face rearranged itself into a loving smile so quickly it was almost impressive. She beamed up at him like he'd said something sweet instead of something dangerous. I took a few more photos, not for sentimental reasons, for documentation. This wasn't just about hurt feelings anymore. It was about watching a train speed toward a cliff and knowing exactly who was driving it. Lydia found me about 20 minutes later. Somehow, she always did. She slipped through the trees, heels in one hand, a pair of flats in the other. "You're terrible at staying away," she murmured, standing beside me. "I didn't come to cause a scene," I said quietly. I just needed to see if her eyes matched her Instagram. We watched in silence as the ceremony began. When the officiant asked if anyone had just cause to object, I felt Lydia's gaze flick toward me. I didn't move. Ruining a wedding with words would have been too easy, too obvious, and honestly, too merciful. "You're really not going to say anything?" she whispered. "Not even pull her aside?" "She chose him over me," I said, my voice low. "She chose a version of reality where I'm the problem and he's her solution. If I drag her away now, I become the villain in their story. Let him be the hero for a while. Heroes with secrets rarely stay heroes for long." As they exchanged rings, something inside me cracked and hardened all at once. Watching her say "I do" without me there to hand her the bouquet felt like attending a funeral where the wrong person was being buried. But I stayed. I watched it all. The vows, the kiss, the cheers. And as everyone clapped, I slipped my phone back into my pocket with the growing collection of digital threads that, one day, would pull this perfect picture apart. From the outside, I probably looked pathetic, lurking behind trees at a wedding I wasn't invited to. But tell me, when you see your own blood walk into a burning building after locking you out, are you pathetic for watching? Or patient for waiting until the flames finally show? After the wedding, the silence between us turned from a bruise into scar tissue. No thank you for past help. No explanation, no apology, just a total blackout. Weeks blurred into each other as I buried myself in work, filming segments, editing campaigns, attending events where everyone shook hands and pretended their lives were perfectly curated and drama-free. On the outside, I played along. On the inside, I was replaying that phone call on a loop. One evening, alone on my couch with a glass of wine I barely tasted, I did the thing I'd been avoiding. I opened social media. My thumb hovered, then betrayed me. I searched her name. There she was. Hannah Taylor. Now with his last name attached like a new accessory. The wedding pictures were everywhere. her smiling under the arch I'd helped her pick out back when we still talked about everything. Him dipping her backward in a spontaneous kiss that was definitely rehearsed. The caption, "Married my best friend, here's to forever." The comments were full of hearts and hashtag couple goals from people who hadn't seen the unedited version. Every image hit like a small, precise blow. But something strange happened as I scrolled. The photos started to warp in my mind. The shot of them laughing under the string lights. For a second, I saw the same scene with Hannah's mascara streaked, arguing in hushed, sharp tones. The image of him lifting her onto the dance floor? It shifted into a courtroom sketch where he sat at a defendant's table, that same jaw now clenched for different reasons. Each polished photo morphed into a potential future. Not because I wished her pain, but because I'd seen enough of him to know it was coming. The question wasn't if, it was when and how. The next day, I made a choice. Pain alone felt pointless. Pain with direction? That I could work with. During my lunch break, I slipped into an empty conference room and opened my laptop. I pulled up the dossier I'd started. Lawsuits, complaints, screenshots of investor warnings, sound bites from known fraud cases that sounded suspiciously familiar. Being in media has its perks. I knew which journalists covered financial misconduct, which regulators were understaffed but hungry for solid leads, which platforms rewarded whistleblowers with anonymity and protection. I didn't have to fabricate anything. All I had to do was connect a few dots that greedy men like Peter assumed no one would bother to connect. I drafted an anonymous email to a business reporter known for exposing corporate scams. I laid out the basics: the company name, the patterns, the settlements that smelled like hush money, the potential harm to investors if it continued. I attached links, public filings, and yes, the audio clip from the wedding day where he hissed, "They can't prove anything." I made sure to frame it as concern for the larger damage, not a personal vendetta. Because it wasn't just personal. Not anymore. When people like him implode, they never fall alone. Then I hesitated with my finger over the send key. This was the point of no return. Once I did this, I couldn't pretend to be just the hurt sister in the background. I'd become the quiet force that nudged the first domino. I thought about calling Hannah again, one last warning before lighting the match. But then I remembered her voice. "I need a fresh start, without the baggage you bring." She chose to see me as baggage, as a problem to cut off. All I was doing now was giving her the clean slate she wanted, minus the man who built his life on lies. I hit send. The email flew off into cyberspace, a tiny digital arrow aimed straight at the inflated balloon of his ego. Later that night, I tried calling her anyway. Old habits, again. The phone rang, and rang. Finally, she picked up, her tone clipped. "What do you want, Sophie?" "Just checking in," I said, hating how small that sounded. "I saw the pictures. I hope you're happy." "Really?" There was a pause. "We're fine," she said. The same flat, rehearsed line. "I'm building a life that doesn't revolve around you." "It never did," I said quietly. "It revolved around me catching you every time you fell." Silence. "I think it's best if you let it go," she added. "I don't need your advice. Or your money. I have my husband now." I almost laughed at how transactional it sounded. Husband as bank account, as emotional crutch, as personality transplant. "Are you sure," I asked, "that you know what you actually have?" "Goodbye, Sophie," she said, and ended the call. As the line went dead, I realized the timing was almost poetic. She had just declared she didn't need anything from me again. And somewhere out there, a reporter was opening my email, reading through the evidence, and making a decision of their own. Tell me, if someone insists they don't need you, are you cruel for stepping back and letting life prove them right? Or are you finally listening, It took about 2 months before the first tremor reached me. I was in the middle of prepping for a live segment when my phone buzzed with a message from Lydia. "Call me ASAP. It's about Hannah." My stomach dropped. I stepped out into the hallway, the noise of the studio fading as I found a quiet corner near the stairwell. I dialed. Lydia picked up on the first ring. "Okay, don't freak out," she said, which of course made my heart pound harder. "But I think the universe just cashed one of your checks." "What happened?" I asked, already bracing for impact. "Remember that company Peter works for? The one you always side-eyed?" she said. "There's an article trending about them. Something about irregularities and investor concerns. Guess whose boss is suddenly under investigation?" My pulse quickened. I didn't even have to check to know which article she meant. "And Hannah?" I asked. "She's freaking out," Lydia said. "She called me earlier, sobbing. Apparently Peter's been stressed for weeks, snapping at her, disappearing late at night, taking calls in the other room. Now their joint accounts are frozen for review, and she has no idea how they're going to pay next month's mortgage." I closed my eyes. The picture formed easily. The curated life cracking at the edges, unpaid bills stacking on the counter, the man who promised security and stability, pacing the kitchen, blaming everyone but himself. "Did she ask about me?" I asked, hating how needy that sounded and hating even more how true it was. Lydia hesitated. "Not at first," she admitted. "But when I told her she needed a lawyer and a reality check, she said Sophie would know what to do." Then she went quiet and said, "But she probably hates me now." I leaned my head against the cool wall, a swirl of emotions fighting for space. Satisfaction, anger, concern, something that felt dangerously like hope. "Does she know I might have helped this along?" I asked. No," Lydia said. "And she doesn't need to. The important thing is that she's finally seeing him without the nice lighting and filters. She's scared. And like it or not, you're still the person she believes could pull her out of this." The irony wasn't lost on me. The sister who told me I was bad for her vibe now wanted my crisis management services back. "What are you going to do?" Lydia asked softly. "Leave her to drown with him? Or throw her a lifeline with barbed wire?" That image made me huff out a humorless laugh. "Is it messed up that I want her to hurt a little?" I asked. "That I want her to feel even a fraction of what I felt watching her choose him over me?" "No," Lydia said. "What would be messed up is pretending you don't feel that. But wanting her to hurt doesn't mean you want her destroyed. There's a difference." After we hung up, I went back to the studio and delivered my segment like nothing had changed. But inside, something was unfolding. That night, as I sat alone in my apartment, my phone lit up with an unknown number. I let it go to voicemail. Then it rang again. And again. The fourth time, I answered. "Hello?" I said, already knowing. "Sophie?" Her voice shattered down the line, raw and shaky. "It's me." It had been months since I'd heard that tone from her. The sound of someone whose world was slipping. "What's wrong?" I asked, even though Lydia had given me the outline. "Everything," she choked out. "They're saying Peter's company might have done things, illegal things. He keeps saying it's nothing, that it's a smear campaign, but the bank froze our accounts and there are people asking questions and I don't know what's real anymore." I listened. Let her pour it all out. The sudden distance, the shouting matches, the way he called her ungrateful when she asked simple questions. How he'd told her it was her fault for spending too much when she asked about money. How he'd started monitoring her texts, demanding to know who she was talking to, calling her disloyal if she didn't immediately pick up. Abuse always sounds the same once you strip away the details. "I don't know what to do," she whispered finally. I don't have access to anything. I don't know what the legal stuff means. I feel stupid and used and I just. Her voice broke. I need you. The words hit me like a physical weight. For months, I'd fantasized about her saying them. In my fantasies, I always rushed in, cape flapping, ready to save her again. But now, with the actual need hanging between us, all I felt was tired. You said you didn't need me, I reminded her quietly. You said you wanted a life without my baggage? I know, she sobbed. I was wrong. I was so wrong. Please, Sophie. I don't know who else to call. There it was. The perfect setup for mercy. The classic turning point where the hero forgives and fixes everything. Only I wasn't sure I wanted to be a hero anymore. I'll think about what I can do, I said. But understand this. I'm not stepping back into the same role. I'm not your bank. I'm not your scapegoat. If I help, it'll be on my terms. I'll agree to anything, she rushed out. Just don't hang up on me. Please. I didn't hang up. Not yet. We talked logistics, documents she needed to gather, questions to ask, the number of a lawyer Lydia's cousin recommended. I laid out steps like a blueprint, practical and clear. When we finally ended the call, she sounded a little less like a drowning person and a little more like someone clinging to wreckage. I put my phone down and stared at the ceiling. If you set a domino chain in motion and then help someone step out of its path at the last moment, are you playing God or just cleaning up after a mess they insisted on walking into? We agreed to meet 2 days later at a cafe far from her neighborhood, a neutral zone where there was little chance of running into anyone who knew either of us. I chose the spot deliberately, the same place we used to go for cheap pastries in college when one of us had a crisis and the other pretended to have it together. Back then, I was always the one with the answers. This time, I promised myself I'd bring something different. Boundaries. When I walked in, she was already there, sitting at a corner table with her hands wrapped around a mug like she needed it to stay upright. For a second, she looked like the girl from our childhood. Smaller somehow, eyes too big for her face, trying to be brave. Hey, I said, sliding into the seat across from her. Hey, she echoed, voice hoarse. Up close, the damage was more obvious. Dark circles, cheekbones sharper than before. A tension in her jaw that hadn't been there when she was busy curating couple photos. You look good, she said weakly. You look like you haven't slept in a week, I replied, because we were past pretending. She let out a brittle laugh that turned into a sigh. Yeah, well, turns out living with a man whose life is a lie isn't actually relaxing. For a moment, we just sat there, the air between us thick with all the things we'd said and not said. Finally, she spoke. I'm sorry, she blurted out, for the text, for the way I talked to you, for choosing him over you, for all of it. I was selfish and cruel, and I don't even know who that version of me was. I watched her carefully. The old me would have rushed in with, "It's okay," before she finished the sentence. The new me let the apology sit there, heavy and deserved. Why did you do it? I asked. Really? No filters? No rehearsed speech? She swallowed hard. Because he made me feel like I finally had something that was mine, she said. You always swooped in and fixed things, and I was grateful, I was, but I also felt small, dependent, like a child. When Peter came along, he made me feel chosen, important. He said we were building a life together, just us. When he told me you were too controlling, that you didn't respect boundaries, I believed him because part of me wanted to. Wanted to what? I pressed. Wanted to be free of owing you everything, she whispered. If you weren't at the wedding, if you weren't part of our daily life, then I could pretend I was standing on my own 2 feet. Even if I was really standing on his. There it was. The ugly truth I'd never forced her to say out loud. I nodded slowly. So you cut me out, I said. Text instead of conversation. Blaming instead of asking. And you thought the bill for that choice would never come due. I didn't think, she admitted. I just wanted the noise to stop. The guilt. He said you made me weak, that I'd never grow up if you kept coddling me. And I was so desperate not to be a burden that I pushed away the only person who actually showed up when things went bad. Her eyes filled with tears. And now things are really bad? Tell me everything, I said. She did. The investigations, the frozen accounts, the way Peter's sweetness flipped to venom the moment she questioned him. The threats, the gaslighting. How he'd hinted that if she really loved him, she'd sign her name onto certain documents. How he called her dramatic for worrying about going to jail for things she didn't understand. Do you love him? I asked when she finally paused. She stared at the table. I loved the version of him he sold me, she said. The man who said he'd protect me from ever feeling poor again, ever feeling like we did after Mom and Dad died. But I don't know if that man ever actually existed. I reached into my bag and pulled out a folder I'd prepared. Printed articles, highlighted sections, notes in the margins. Thin, but sharp. I laid it on the table between us. This is who he really is, I said. Or at least, part of it. Her hands trembled slightly as she opened it. She read in silence, eyes darting across headlines and legal jargon, absorbing words like alleged misappropriation of funds, fraudulent misrepresentation, settlement reached, details sealed. At one point she looked up, expression a mix of horror and realization. Did you know all this before the wedding? She whispered. Some of it, I admitted. Enough to be worried, not enough to be certain. So I kept watching. And when I saw the pattern match other cases I've covered, I connected the dots. I sent them to someone who could do something about it. She blinked, stunned. You reported him? The accusation was there, hovering. I met her gaze. I reported potential wrongdoing that could hurt a lot of people, I said evenly. If he were innocent, it would have gone nowhere. But he isn't. You're just seeing that now. She closed the folder slowly, breathing hard. For a moment I thought she might explode, scream at me, accuse me of ruining her life, of being jealous, of orchestrating all of this out of spite. Instead, she did something I didn't expect. She deflated. So this is my karma, she said quietly. I chose a liar over the sister who kept me alive. I cut you out to feel independent and ended up more trapped than ever. And the person I tried to erase is the same person who pulled the fire alarm before the building collapsed completely. Her shoulders slumped. I don't even know if I deserve your help. You don't, I said, because we were done with lies. She flinched. But, I continued, deserving has never been the only metric I use. If it were, I would have stopped helping you years ago. A faint, wet laugh escaped her. So what now? She asked. Do you get revenge by watching me lose everything? Or do you save me just enough so I can rebuild and spend the rest of my life knowing I burned the only real bridge I ever had? That's not my revenge, I said. My revenge is not letting you live in the story you told yourself, that I'm the villain and he's the hero. My revenge is watching the truth rearrange your entire worldview until you can't pretend you didn't know better. I took a breath. Here's what I'm willing to do. I'll help you get a lawyer. I'll go with you if you need support in meetings. I'll help you untangle what's legally yours from the mess he created. But I will not pay off his debts. I will not rescue you financially from this. I will not move you into my apartment and start the cycle over again where I fix everything and you learn nothing. Tears slid down her cheeks, but she nodded. That's fair, she said quietly. Brutally fair. I'll also help you find a therapist, I added, because this isn't just about him. It's about why you thought you had to erase me to feel like an adult. That pattern doesn't go away just because he does. She wiped her face with the back of her hand and looked at me like she was seeing me for the first time. Not as a safety net, not as a threat, but as a person with limits. Thank you, she whispered, for not letting me off the hook, and for not leaving me on it alone. We sat there for a while longer, sketching out practical steps. Call the lawyer, pull copies of documents, quietly open a separate account in her name only, plan what to say and not say if investigators asked her questions. When we finally stood to leave, she hesitated. Do you think we'll ever be like we were? She asked. I thought of sleepovers and shared secrets, of joint playlists and inside jokes. Then I thought of the text that started all this. No, I said honestly, but maybe we'll be something better, clearer, with less pretending. She nodded, swallowing hard, and walked out into a future that looked nothing like the one she'd posted about. As I watched her go, I realized something important. Revenge hadn't been the fire that burned her life down. Her choices and his lies had done that. My part was simply refusing to rebuild the same house on the same rotten foundation. So tell me, after everything you've heard, was I cruel? Or was I finally fair?